The ridge rose like a jagged scar against the pale morning sky, its rocks jutting out in broken teeth. From a distance, it looked barren, almost lifeless, just a strip of earth where sparse trees clung desperately to dry soil. Yet for the patrol inching closer, the ridge wasn't a landscape. It was a question mark, a looming uncertainty, the kind of ground that could either be empty or waiting with hidden rifles. Corporal Anna Reyes adjusted the strap of her heavy medic's pack, the weight digging into her shoulders. Inside it wasn't food or ammunition, but gauze, morphine, tourniquets, field dressings, 4 kits items meant to stitch bodies back together. She had carried that pack across valleys, through villages, and down muddy roads. It felt heavier today, as though the ridge itself pressed against her spine. She walked near the back of the formation, boots crunching softly over gravel, each step deliberate. Her position wasn't an accident. Medics weren't meant to be at the front, not where bullets flew first. Still, Anna knew better than to think of herself as safe. A medic's place was everywhere danger struck. If someone went down, she had to move forward, sideways, into the thick of it, without hesitation. That was her role, the unspoken contract she'd accepted when she donned the Red Cross armband months earlier. Ahead, Sergeant Miller moved with a predator's caution. His tall frame bent low, his left hand raised slightly as if to feel the air. The man had been in combat long enough to smell trouble before it showed itself. His eyes swept across every rock outcrop, every shadow where an enemy could hide. He didn't say a word. A silence was enough. The patrol was 12 strong, a mix of hardened veterans and young replacements, still carrying the unease of newness. Their rifles shifted from hand to hand, the faint clink of gear echoing unnervingly loud in the quiet morning. The air held a strange stillness, broken only by a restless wind that whistled through the thin trees. Anna found herself glancing upward often, her gaze tracing the edges of the ridge. Nothing moved there, yet her chest tightened. The men muttered in low tones when the wind dipped. Small talk, nervous talk about the heat, about how long the march would take, about whether they'd eat before sundown. Anna didn't join in. She listened, not just to their words, but to the pitch of their voices. A medic learned to hear stress, fatigue, even fear. They were uneasy. She was uneasy too. Her mind drifted briefly to her first day in the field. Back then, she had believed her job was only to patch up wounds. Reality had taught her otherwise. A medic was more than bandages. She had to move under fire, find men who were bleeding out, and make decisions in seconds that determined if someone lived or died. Sometimes she had to crawl through mud, dragging a body heavier than her own, while rounds snapped overhead. Sometimes she had to decide who got morphine first, who could wait, who wouldn't make it. It wasn't the work of a hero. It was the work of someone who endured. That thought steadied her steps now, even as unease gnawed deeper with each yard they climbed. The ridge loomed larger. From below, its face was cracked with narrow gullies and sharp boulders. Perfect cover for an ambush. Miller slowed, raising his clenched fist. The line halted instantly, discipline clicking into place. Men crouched, rifles at the ready. Anna dropped behind a rock, her breath shallow. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. For a long moment, the world seemed suspended, as though the ridge itself were holding its breath. Anna could hear the wind again, brushing past her ears, stirring the straps on her helmet. She shifted slightly, scanning the terrain. No birds, no distant chatter. Just silence, heavy and unnatural. And it came. A faint sound carried on the breeze, metallic, deliberate, a click. Anna's heart seized. That wasn't wind. That wasn't nature. That was a weapon being readied. Her eyes darted to Miller. He had heard it too. His jaw tightened, his hand gesturing sharply. The men froze harder, every muscle coiled. Anna felt her pulse hammer in her temples. She wasn't holding a rifle across her chest. She had only the sidearm holstered at her hip, a pistol she had barely fired outside training. Her hands, instead, were meant for pressure dressings and 4 lines. She should have felt useless in this pause before violence. Yet she knew in her bones, when the first man screamed, she would have to run toward it. The seconds stretched thin. Sweat trickled down the back of her neck. Her breath fogged faintly in the cool air. The ridge gave no answers, only silence. And that silence was worse than the coming noise. Anna shifted her pack straps again, grounding herself. She remembered the mantra they drilled into medics. Move fast, stay low, keep them breathing. She whispered it in her head, like a prayer. Around her, rifles trembled slightly in clenched fists. Private Lewis muttered something under his breath, maybe a curse or a plea. She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on the ridge. It was there, in that unbearable pause, that Anna realized something deeper. Medics weren't shielded from the war. They weren't excused from danger. They lived closer to it than anyone. If the ridge came alive with fire, she wouldn't have the luxury of hiding. She would have to crawl into the teeth of it, drag men back, pour her hands into broken bodies while chaos raged. And that thought didn't make her shrink. It made her straighten her back, even as she crouched. Fear existed, yes, but duty sat heavier, more immovable. A gust of wind rushed through the trees, louder this time, scattering dust across their boots. The sound masked everything else, filling her ears, tugging at her nerves. When it faded, Anna realized her hand had drifted to her pistol. She hadn't drawn it, but her palm rested on the grip, a quiet acknowledgement of possibility. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled, exhaled, and whispered to herself again. Keep them breathing. The ridge, still silent, waited. Somewhere beyond those rocks, she knew, eyes were watching. The patrol held its breath on the ridge's lower slope. Every man's ears strained against the wind, listening for anything that might betray the enemy. The metallic click still lingered in Anna's head, sharp and unnatural, like a warning bell that refused to fade. Then the world tore open. A thunderclap of gunfire cracked from above. The first burst shredded the silence, bullets whipping past with terrifying precision. Sparks flared off stone. Shouts erupted, raw and panicked, as the men dove for cover. Contact! Contact on the ridge. Miller's voice thundered, cutting through the chaos. Anna's body moved before her thoughts could catch up. She flattened against the rock, arms hugging her medical pack. The air buzzed with rounds slicing past, sharp and merciless. Dust stung her eyes. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. The squad scattered into positions, some rolling behind rocks, others hugging the dirt. Rifles snapped upward, spitting bursts in the general direction of the attack. But the ridge swallowed their fire. The enemy was invisible, tucked behind cover, shadows with rifles. Anna pressed herself tighter to the stone, breath shallow. Her hand brushed her pistol, but stopped. That wasn't her weapon. Her weapon was in her pack. She forced her focus inward, checking herself, grounding herself in routine. Count the men. Listen for screams. Move when they fall. The first came seconds later. A cry split through the gunfire high, sharp, agonized. Anna's stomach clenched. Someone was hit. She peeked from behind her boulder, dust clouding her vision. Private Lewis was sprawled out in the open, one hand clutching his thigh, blood pooling fast beneath him. He writhed helplessly, his rifle lying just beyond his reach. Anna's pulse surged. She knew what that amount of blood meant. Artery. If she didn't get to him within a minute, he'd bleed out. Miller shouted orders, his voice ragged. Suppressing fire. Keep them pinned. Rifles roared, men firing wildly into the ridge to keep the enemy's heads down. It was now or never. Anna slung her pack forward, tightened the straps, and dropped to her belly. The ground was hot and rough, gravel grinding into her elbows as she crawled. Bullets spat dirt around her. One slammed into a rock just inches from her face, showering her with shards. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself not to freeze. "Hang on, Lewis," she shouted, though her voice was nearly drowned by gunfire. He groaned, lifting his head weakly, eyes wide with fear. "Corporal, don't." Another burst cracked overhead. She ignored it, crawling faster, dragging herself forward like every inch was borrowed time. Her lungs burned, dust choking her throat. The weight of the medic pack slowed her, but she welcomed it. That pack was her reason. Without it, she was just another soldier. With it, she was their lifeline. At last she reached him. She yanked him by the vest, hauling him closer to cover, her muscles screaming in protest. His blood smeared across her gloves, hot and sticky. "Stay with me," she hissed. "Don't look at your leg, look at me." He gasped, face pale, sweat beading. "It's bad, isn't it?" Anna ripped open a bandage, her hands trembling only for a second before steadying. Training took over. She pressed hard against the wound, gauze soaking red instantly. "It's not good," she admitted, "but you're not dying here. Not today." Her voice was calm, though inside she felt the tremors of fear. Gunfire continued to hammer around them. Men shouted, rifles barked, stone cracked. Anna blocked it all out. Her world had shrunk to Lewis's wound, to the pressure she applied, to the tourniquet she pulled from her kit with shaking hands. She looped it above the wound, cinching it tight until he screamed through clenched teeth. "Breathe," she ordered firmly. "Pain means you're still alive." He obeyed, chest heaving, eyes locked on hers. That was good. Keeping him focused meant keeping him present, keeping him alive. But even as she worked, Anna couldn't shake the sense of wrongness. The enemy's fire wasn't chaotic. It wasn't wild. It was deliberate. Someone above them was controlling the fight, keeping them pinned perfectly. Another bullet smacked into the dirt just feet from her. She ducked instinctively, then glanced upward. Through the haze of dust and smoke, she caught it. A shadow shifting along the ridge. Calm, controlled. A sniper. Her stomach dropped. That explained the precision, the relentless accuracy, pinning them down. This wasn't just random fire. It was a trap. And unless someone silenced that rifle, no amount of bandages would matter. Still, she shoved the thought aside. Her job wasn't killing. Her job was keeping this young man's blood inside his body. She tightened the tourniquet, checked his pulse, and gave him a quick nod. "You're stable. I'm dragging you back." He shook his head weakly. "You'll get shot. I'll take that chance." She hooked her arms under his shoulders, pulling with every ounce of strength she had. Inch by inch, she dragged him across the dirt, rocks cutting into her knees. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she didn't stop. Every second mattered. Behind her, the rest of the squad kept firing, their bursts desperate but determined. Miller's voice roared over the gunfire, calling for grenades, for cover fire, for anyone to keep that ridge occupied. Anna didn't look back. She couldn't. She focused only on Lewis, on the ground, on the cover ahead. Another bullet snapped past, close enough to feel the heat of its passing. She clenched her teeth, pulling harder. At last, she reached the edge of cover, rolling him behind a rock where the bullets couldn't find him. She collapsed beside him, chest heaving, sweat stinging her eyes. But Lewis was breathing alive, his pulse strong under her fingers. That was enough. Only then did she allow herself to look back up at the ridge. And when she did, she saw the glint of sunlight reflecting off a scope. Her blood ran cold. The sniper wasn't firing randomly. He was watching, waiting, calculating. And though she had saved Lewis, she knew the fight was only beginning. Anna crouched low, pressing her back against the rock as dust rained over her helmet. Lewis's scream still echoed in her ears. She had dragged him just far enough to shield him from immediate fire, but blood pulsed fast from his thigh, soaking through the gauze she'd slapped down. Her gloves were slick, red, and sticky. "Stay with me," she muttered, forcing her voice to sound steady. "You're not going anywhere. You hear me, Private?" Lewis gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his pale face. His fingers clutched at her arm with surprising strength. "It burns, God. It burns." "That's good," Anna said quickly, tightening the tourniquet higher up on his leg. "Pain means you're alive. Don't fight me. Just breathe." Her hands moved with practiced speed. Training took over where panic wanted to creep in. Gauze, pressure, tourniquet, check pulse, adjust. The rhythm was almost mechanical now, like muscle memory working through the chaos. She'd done this dozens of times before field medicine under fire, but never under this kind of precision attack. Because that's what it was. Precision. The gunfire wasn't wild or wasteful. Every burst seemed measured, deliberate, forcing Miller's squad into positions where they couldn't move. Whoever was up there wasn't just firing. He was controlling the battlefield. Anna risked a glance over the edge of the rock. Through the haze of smoke and dust, she caught a flicker of movement. High on the ridge, a figure shifted with unnerving calm, nothing like the frantic scrambles of the others. A long barrel glinted as the sun struck a scope. Her chest tightened. A sniper. The realization chilled her, more than the bullets tearing past. She ducked quickly back down, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. If she'd seen him, then he'd seen her. And if he wanted her gone, she wouldn't even hear the round that killed her. "Medic!" Another voice shouted from somewhere to her left. Anna snapped her gaze around, torn in two directions. Lewis was still bleeding, though the tourniquet had slowed it. Another man was hit. She had to move again. "Stay down, Lewis." She barked, locking eyes with him. "I'll be back." He nodded weakly, jaw clenched against the pain. Anna grabbed her pack and crawled, hugging the dirt as bullets sparked against stone. She darted from rock to rock, her mind narrowing to the sound of cries and gunfire. Another soldier, Carter, was lying twisted, clutching his shoulder where blood poured down his sleeve. She skidded beside him, pulling out fresh bandages. "I got you," she said, voice firm. "Hold still." His eyes flicked toward her, wide and panicked. "Am I?" "You're fine." She cut him off. "If you can talk, you're fine. Now shut up and let me work." She tore open his vest, pressed a pad hard into the wound, and taped it down with practiced force. The bleeding slowed. Carter winced but obeyed, breathing raggedly. "Keep pressure on that," Anna ordered, guiding his hand to the dressing. "Don't lift it, no matter what." He nodded, jaw tight. Bullets snapped overhead again. One slammed into the rock just above her head, spraying fragments across her cheek. Anna flinched but stayed crouched, forcing herself not to freeze. Her fear was a living thing clawing at her ribs, but her body moved anyway. She had no choice. She peeked again. The sniper was still there. Still calm. Still deliberate. His shots weren't wild bursts. They were surgical, cutting off angles, keeping the squad pinned. It was like he could see the whole battlefield at once, pulling invisible strings. Miller's voice roared across the chaos. We can't push forward. We need to take out that sniper. But no one moved. No one could. Every time a helmet lifted above cover, the sniper's round cracked dangerously close. Anna ducked back down, chest heaving. She pressed her palms briefly against her thighs, trying to ground herself. You're a medic, she reminded herself. Your job is keeping them alive, not taking shots. And yet, a creeping thought wormed into her mind. What good was saving Lewis, saving Carter, saving anyone, if that sniper kept them all pinned here until reinforcements swarmed? Bandages couldn't stop bullets that hadn't been fired yet. She shook the thought away, forcing herself to focus. Another cry erupted behind her. Another man down. Anna grabbed her kit again and moved, crawling through dust and smoke, her whole body screaming against the danger. She slid beside the wounded, another bloody mess of torn flesh, and repeated the process. Hands steady, voice calm, focus absolute. But no matter how hard she worked, no matter how many men she stabilized, she felt the shadow of that rifle on her, patient, waiting. And deep inside, though she didn't want to admit it, she knew this fight wasn't just about bandages anymore. It was about survival. Anna pressed her back against the jagged stone, her breath ragged and shallow. She had done what she could. Tourniquets tightened, bandages sealed, men pulled behind what cover they could find. But the battlefield didn't care about gauze or morphine. The rifle on the ridge still ruled everything, pinning them like insects beneath the glass. Another crack split the air, sharper, closer this time. A helmet shattered yards away, fragments spinning through the dust. The man beneath it threw himself down, scrambling for cover. Fear rippled through the squad like lightning, their bursts of fire growing shorter, more desperate. Miller crouched behind a rock a few yards away, his face streaked with grime and fury. We can't move until that bastard's down, he shouted, his voice booming above the chaos. He jabbed a finger toward the ridge, where the scope's glint winked like an eye. He's cutting us apart. The men fired back, but it was blind fury, rounds pinging harmlessly against stone. The sniper barely flinched. Each of his shots was methodical, patient, designed to remind them of their vulnerability. Anna felt it with every round. Her stomach clenched tighter with each crack of his rifle. Her hands, still smeared with blood, trembled slightly as she repacked her kit. Her role was supposed to be clear. Medics didn't shoot. They saved. She had whispered that mantra into her own ears more times than she could count. Keep them breathing. That was her weapon. But now, her weapon was useless. She glanced at Lewis, who was pale but conscious, propped against a rock. His leg was bound, bleeding controlled for now. His rifle lay discarded a few feet away, knocked from his grasp when the round tore into him. The black metal glistened faintly under the sun, untouched, waiting. Anna's chest tightened. Her eyes darted back to the ridge. The sniper shifted slightly, angling his scope. The patrol froze instinctively, every man knowing he could claim another life at will. A thought, uninvited and unwelcome, clawed its way into Anna's mind. What if it has to be me? She shook her head fiercely, whispering under her breath, No, that's not who I am. That's not my job. But the battlefield answered with another crack, another cry, another man hitting the dirt. Blood sprayed across rock, hot and real. The soldier screamed, clutching his side, calling for her. Anna's body tensed to move, but Miller's hand shot out, holding her back. Stay down, Reyes. You'll get killed. He's bleeding. She snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. Miller's eyes were hard. We're all bleeding if that sniper isn't taken out. Her lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't wrong. Every second she spent crawling into the open, dragging men back, was another second the sniper adjusted his aim. She could save one. But the sniper would drop another, and another, until there was no one left to save. Her gaze returned to Lewis's rifle. The thought grew louder now, impossible to silence. Anna's throat went dry. She hadn't held a rifle in months, not seriously. At boot camp, she'd qualified, like everyone else, but barely. Marksman wasn't her title. Medic was. She healed the broken. She did not make others broken. But the sniper's scope flashed again. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could almost feel it on her. That crosshair tracing down through the dust, hunting. If she could see him, he could see her. And at any moment, he would choose. Anna's hands curled into fists. She wanted to scream. She wanted the ridge to swallow him whole, for Miller to find some miracle of firepower, for anything to absolve her of the thought gnawing at her heart. But miracles didn't exist here. Slowly, almost against her own will, her eyes slid back to the rifle. Lewis noticed. His face twisted with pain, but his gaze sharpened. "Riaz," he croaked, his voice weak but urgent. "Take it." Anna shook her head violently. "No, I'm not." "You have to," he rasped, grabbing her wrist with surprising force. "He'll kill us all." "You know it." Her mouth opened, but no words came, because he was right. Another shot cracked. Another man screamed. The sound tore into her chest. Anna's hand trembled as it reached toward the weapon. The metal was slick with dust and blood, heavier than she remembered. She pulled it close, her arms wrapping around it awkwardly at first. Her heart thundered in her chest. The weight felt wrong. This wasn't her tool. It didn't belong in her hands. And yet, it fit there too easily, as though the war itself demanded it. Miller glanced over, eyes widening. "Reyes, what the hell are you?" "Cover me." She cut him off, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. He hesitated, then gave a curt nod. He knew better than to argue. Anna slid down against the rock, breathing hard. Her hands adjusted the rifle, fingers fumbling at first, until training varied, but not gone, began to surface. Stock against shoulder, cheek against rest, one eye closed, sight lined with breath. Her mind screamed at her, "You're a medic. You don't do this. You don't cross this line." But her heart whispered back, "If you don't, they die." Through the scope, the world narrowed. Dust, smoke, chaos all blurred. Only the ridge sharpened into clarity. The rocks, the shadows. And there calm, still, patient the sniper. Her breath hitched. The man adjusted his rifle, scanning for his next target. He hadn't seen her yet. She had one chance, one moment. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Her stomach knotted so tight she thought she'd vomit. "This isn't me," she whispered. "This isn't me." But the sniper's muzzle dipped, aiming again. Anna exhaled slowly. Her fingers steadied, and for the first time, she aimed to take a life instead of save one. The world funneled into the thin circle of her scope. Nothing else mattered. Dust, gunfire, the cries of her squadmates, they all dissolved into a muffled hum at the edge of her awareness. All that remained was the ridge. And him. The sniper lay prone, utterly calm amidst the chaos he had created. His rifle extended like a limb, the scope steady as if it were part of his skull. He was still, so still, the kind of stillness that meant lethal focus. Each small adjustment of his shoulder was calculated, each second of pause deliberate. He wasn't firing wildly. He was choosing. Anna's finger tightened on the trigger, but her entire body screamed in resistance. She could almost hear her instructors, years back, reminding the medics that their rifles were for emergencies only. She could hear herself promising she would never use hers for anything but defense. She was supposed to heal, not kill. Her hands shook, the sight jittering over his form. She pulled back, then realigned. Sweat slid down her temple. Another crack tore through the air. Somewhere to her right, a man yelped, his helmet thrown from his head by the force of a near miss. Anna flinched, but held her scope steady. If you don't stop him, he'll hit the next one. She steadied her breathing, forcing her chest to rise and fall in rhythm. Her father's old words whispered in memory words he'd told her before boot camp. Sometimes you don't get to choose who you are. Sometimes the moment chooses for you. This was that moment. Her finger curled. The trigger clicked, breaking the invisible barrier. The rifle roared, kicking back against her shoulder, the force jarring her bones. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, through the scope, she saw it. The sniper jerked violently, his body snapping back as if struck by lightning. His rifle clattered from his grip, tumbling down the slope. Dust plumed around him as his figure went limp, sliding awkwardly down the rocks until he stilled. Anna's breath caught. Her heart stopped. She blinked, disbelieving. She had fired. She had hit. She had ended him. The battlefield froze in eerie silence. No more cracks from the ridge. No surgical fire keeping them pinned. Just the ragged breaths of men, the crackle of radios, and the sudden awareness that the shadow hanging over them was gone. Miller was the first to move. He raised his head cautiously, scanning the ridge. When no shot answered, he barked out, "Cease fire! Cease fire!" His voice rang out, more shocked than commanding. The men lowered their rifles, exchanging wary looks. Slowly, disbelief shifted into realization. They weren't under fire anymore. Snipers down. Someone shouted, voice breaking with relief. Another soldier let out a hoarse laugh, half hysterical, half euphoric. A ripple of exhausted cheers followed, rough and uneven, but real. Anna lowered the rifle slowly, her hands numb. Her ears rang, not from the gunfire, but from the weight of what she had done. The weapon felt heavier now, as though it carried not just metal and powder, but the invisible burden of a life extinguished. Her stomach churned. She wanted to vomit. She wanted to drop the rifle and scrub her hands raw. She had crossed the line, the one she'd sworn never to approach. But when she looked around at Lewis, alive because she'd bound his leg, at Carter, still breathing because she'd dressed his shoulder, at the men who had been seconds away from becoming targets, she knew why she had done it. Still, the knowledge didn't settle easy. It burned. Lewis caught her eye from where he leaned against the rock. His face was pale, lips dry, but his gaze was steady. He gave her the faintest nod, a silent acknowledgement. He knew what it had cost her. Miller jogged over, crouching beside her. His expression was unreadable, at first hardened, as always but softer around the edges now. He rested a hand briefly on her shoulder. "Good shot," he said quietly. Anna flinched, shaking her head. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't call it that." Miller studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod as if understanding. "You saved lives," he said simply, then turned away to rally the men. She sat there, the rifle still across her knees, unable to let go. Her chest rose and fell in short, uneven bursts. Around her, the squad regrouped, voices rising in the relief of survival. But she heard none of it clearly. All she could hear was the echo of the shot in her own head, over and over. For the first time in her service, Anna Reyes had taken a life. Not by accident, not by necessity of defense, but by choice. And though she knew it had been the only way, though she knew they would all be dead otherwise, the weight of it pressed down harder than the dust-filled sky. She looked at her blood-stained hands, then at the rifle. One had healed. The other had killed. Both belonged to her now. The ridge stood silent, its shadow no longer menacing but grave. The sniper was gone. The patrol would live. But Anna wondered, as she finally set the rifle aside, whether a part of her had died there on that ridge too. The silence after the sniper's fall did not last. Within minutes, the patrol's radios crackled with orders, Miller barking commands to reorganize. The ridge that had felt like a prison moments ago was now their objective. They had to move, sweep it, and make sure no more hostiles lingered above. Anna rose slowly, her legs stiff and unsteady. She wiped her bloody gloves against her trousers, though it did little good. The stains were ground in now, soaked deep. Her hands trembled not from the climb ahead, but from the memory of the recoil that still echoed in her shoulder. "On your feet," Miller roared. His voice was raw but steady. "We push now, before reinforcements get here. Reyes, check the wounded, then fall in." Anna nodded, forcing her mind to refocus. Duty first. Emotions later. She crouched by Lewis again, checking his pulse and the dressing. He was stable, though pale. She injected a small dose of morphine, whispering reassurance as his breathing slowed into steadier rhythm. "You hang on," she said firmly, her voice sharper than she intended. "We're getting you out of here." Lewis managed a faint smile. "You too, Doc. Don't forget yourself." The words struck her deeper than he likely intended. She moved on, checking Carter and the others, hands working automatically while her thoughts spiraled. They looked at her differently now, not just as the medic who patched their wounds, but as the soldier who had ended the sniper. Their gratitude carried a quiet edge, something wary and unspoken. When she rejoined the patrol, Miller gestured for her to fall in behind the second squad. They began the climb toward the ridge, boots crunching over loose rock, rifles raised and eyes darting. The air smelled of cordite and iron. Every step carried the possibility of another ambush, but it was easier, now without that unseen rifle pinning them down. The men moved with a confidence that hadn't been there minutes before. Anna trudged in silence, the weight of her pack digging into her shoulders. She carried more than bandages now. She carried the memory of that man's face, blurred in her scope, but still a face. She wondered if he had a medic of his own somewhere, someone who had promised to heal and not to kill. She wondered if they'd ever know what became of him. The ridge loomed closer, jagged and sun-bleached. The squad fanned out cautiously. Miller raised a fist, signaling a halt. Scouts moved forward, scanning the rocks. The stillness was oppressive. No more gunfire. No more shouts. Just the crunch of boots and the rasp of shallow breaths. Anna crouched, her eyes scanning the ground. Blood trails led toward where the sniper had fallen. When they reached him, his body lay twisted against the rock, rifle snapped where it had struck stone. His face was half hidden in shadow, younger than she had expected. His eyes were open, blank, staring at nothing. The men glanced at him, then away. One kicked dirt over the body without ceremony. For them, he was just another enemy neutralized. A problem solved. Anna stared longer. Her stomach twisted. She couldn't look away, even as her chest tightened until breathing hurt. This was the man who had nearly killed them all. The man she had stopped. And yet, he was also just a boy, not much older than Lewis. Flesh and bone, fragile like the rest of them. Miller noticed her stillness. "Reyes," he said lowly, "don't carry him with you. He made his choice. You made yours. Leave it on this ridge." But she couldn't, not yet. They moved on, sweeping the rocks for stragglers. There were none. Whoever had supported the sniper had retreated when he fell. The ridge was theirs now. From the top, the valley stretched below, shimmering in heat. The silence felt heavy, unnatural after hours of chaos. Miller gathered the men, his voice cutting through the wind. "We hold here until extraction. Keep sharp. "We're not out yet." The men dispersed, settling behind cover, sipping water, reloading magazines. The tension eased slightly, relief bleeding into exhaustion. Anna sat apart, her kit spread open as she rechecked the wounded. She worked methodically, wrapping fresh bandages, securing 4 lines, whispering encouragement. Her patients clung to her presence, trusting her hands more than the rifles around them. But even as she healed, she felt their eyes linger. Some looked at her with gratitude, admiration even. Others looked with a flicker of unease, as though she were no longer just their medic, but something else entirely. She felt it too. She was divided now. One hand bound wounds, the other had pulled a trigger. Could both truths exist in one person? Could she still call herself healer after choosing to kill? The ridge wind whipped dust across her face, stinging her eyes. She blinked hard, focusing on Lewis's breathing, on Carter's pulse, on anything but the sniper's empty stare. "Reyes," Miller's voice broke through. He crouched beside her, watching as she tightened a bandage. "You did more today than anyone expected. You kept them alive. Don't lose sight of that." Anna didn't look up. "I wasn't supposed to take that shot. You weren't supposed to watch your squad die either," Miller countered. His tone wasn't harsh, but firm, the voice of a man who had buried too many soldiers already. "War doesn't care about our promises. Sometimes we do what we swore we never would. And sometimes that's the only reason anyone makes it home." She let his words hang in the air, heavy and unyielding. She wanted to reject them, to cling to the belief that her oath as a medic was untouchable. But part of her knew he was right. When Miller walked away, Anna sat back against the rock, closing her eyes. The sounds of the squad faded into the background. For the first time since the patrol began, she allowed herself to breathe, not just the shallow breaths of survival, but deep, steadying ones. The ridge had demanded something of her. It had taken from her a peace she could never reclaim, but it had also given her men a chance to live. She wasn't sure yet what that meant. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley, Anna stared at her hands again. Blood on the gloves, dirt under the nails. One hand that had killed, one hand that had saved, both hers. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that the war would ask again. The sun had begun its slow descent by the time Miller confirmed over the radio. Extraction would arrive, but not for several hours. The valley stretched empty and silent below, but everyone knew silence was deceptive. Reinforcements could already be moving through that haze, searching for the sniper who no longer answered their calls. The squad dug in along the ridgeline, stacking rocks into hasty cover, checking magazines, repositioning fields of fire. Exhaustion hung heavy, but it was the sharp, twitching kind that came from too much adrenaline and too little rest. No one let their guard drop. Anna worked quietly, moving from man to man. She checked pulses, adjusted bandages, whispered reminders to drink water. Her touch steadied them. Her presence reminded them they weren't abandoned to the dust. Yet everywhere she went, she felt it the shift in their gazes. Some eyes lit with gratitude, following her like a talisman. Others lingered longer, hesitant, as though seeing her now as more than their medic. She had crossed a line, and the men felt it as surely as she did. Lewis broke the silence first. His voice was weak, but it carried. "You all saw her." Doc dropped the bastard like she'd been doing it her whole life. A few men chuckled nervously. One muttered, "Hell of a shot." Another added, "Didn't know we had a sniper of our own." Anna froze mid-motion, her hands tightening around the roll of gauze. She wanted to correct them, to insist it wasn't like that she wasn't their sniper. But the words stuck in her throat. Miller shut the chatter down with a sharp glance. She did what had to be done. End of story. Eyes out. No one relaxes until the bird touches down. The men nodded, chastened, but the undercurrent lingered. Anna retreated to the edge of the ridge, sitting with her back against a stone. From here, the valley looked endless, waves of sand and rock blurring into the horizon. Somewhere out there, enemy fighters would be regrouping. She imagined them hearing the news, their sharpshooter silenced, his perch taken. Rage would drive them. She knew the patrol wasn't safe yet. Her rifle lay at her side, propped awkwardly against the rock. She hadn't wanted to keep it, but abandoning it felt wrong. A medic without her kit was unthinkable. Now, it seemed, a medic without a rifle was just as unthinkable. She stared at it, the weight of it gnawing at her. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a reminder, a boundary shattered. The wind shifted, carrying faint sounds up the valley. Voices? Engines? Hard to tell. The men stiffened, weapons raised, scanning the horizon. Movement, bearing east, one of the scouts called, peering through binoculars. Anna's stomach tightened. So it was true reinforcements were coming. Miller swore under his breath. We hold until evac. Do not waste ammo. The squad braced. A tense half-hour passed, shapes flickering at the edge of vision, never close enough to engage, but never far enough to forget. Each shadow made Anna's pulse race. Between checks on her wounded, she sat still, listening to the rhythm of her own breath. She thought of the sniper again, how calm he had been, how deliberate. She wondered if he had sat just like this, steady and focused, before choosing his shots. The thought unsettled her. Lewis spoke again, voice rasping but insistent. Reyes, don't beat yourself up. You saved us. Anna looked at him. His pale face was sincere, his gaze steady despite the pain. You saw what I did, she whispered. Yeah, he said. And I'm still breathing because of it. Others nearby nodded. One man added, Doc, we'd be corpses in that dirt if you hadn't pulled the trigger. Don't ever doubt that. Their gratitude warmed and chilled her at once. She had given them life by taking another. The balance felt impossible to hold. Miller interrupted, voice firm. Cut the talk. She did her job, same as the rest of us. Focus forward. But Anna heard the unspoken truth. Her job had changed, whether she wanted it to or not. As the light faded, the squad grew restless. Shadows stretched long, blending the rocks into jagged silhouettes. The tension mounted with the coming dark. Enemy fire hadn't returned yet, but no one believed it wouldn't. Anna forced herself to stay busy. She changed dressings by touch, checked 4 drips in the dim light, whispered encouragement to keep the men anchored. Her words mattered more now. They weren't just promises of survival, but reminders that humanity still existed in this desolate place. Yet when she sat back, fatigue pressing down, her eyes always found the ridge where the sniper had lain. The dirt already beginning to cover his body. The silence where his rifle had ruled. She couldn't stop seeing it, couldn't stop feeling the weight of her choice echoing in her chest. Hours crawled by. The men dozed in short, tense bursts, rifles clutched against their chests. Anna remained awake, the night pressing in around her. Each sound from the valley snapped her eyes open wider, each gust of wind prickling her skin. She wasn't just a medic anymore. She was something else. Something she hadn't chosen, but couldn't deny. When the distant thrum of helicopter blades finally reached them, relief spread through the squad like fire. Men stirred, gripping weapons tighter. Extraction was coming. They just had to hold a little longer. But as Anna rose to her feet, scanning the dark horizon, she knew one truth with certainty. Even once they were lifted from this ridge, she wouldn't be leaving it behind. Part of her would always be here caught between the blood she'd saved and the blood she'd spilled. The distant thrum of the helicopter grew louder, vibrating through the ridge. Dust rose around the men as they scrambled to organize their wounded for extraction. Relief mingled with exhaustion, a strange cocktail that left everyone unsteady. Anna crouched beside Lewis, checking his 4-1 last time. His leg was stable, pulse steady. She let out a quiet breath, but it barely eased the tension coiling in her chest. Around her, the squad moved with mechanical precision boots sliding over stone, hands gripping rifles, eyes scanning for any remaining threat. The helicopter descended, the rotor wash tossing gravel and dust into the air. It seemed impossibly close and impossibly far, all at once. Men shouted over the roar, signaling their positions, guiding the wounded toward the open side. Anna lifted Lewis carefully, supporting most of his weight herself. She could feel his body trembling against hers, fatigue and pain stealing strength, but he held on. "You did it, Doc," he rasped. "You kept us alive." "I just did what I had to," she replied, voice tight. "That's all." She avoided looking at the rifle resting nearby. Its weight was an unspoken reminder of the choice she had made, of the life she had ended so that others could continue theirs. She couldn't unsee the sniper's blank stare, couldn't unfeel the recoil or the sudden silence that followed the fatal shot. As she helped Lewis into the helicopter, she noticed how the men's eyes followed her. Some looked with admiration, some with gratitude, others with that quiet hesitation, the awareness that she was now more than just a medic. She had crossed the line they had all known existed, and they saw it in her posture, the tension in her shoulders, the way she didn't speak of it. Miller climbed aboard last, scanning the ridge one final time. "Good work, everyone," he said, voice rough but steady. "We're out of here. Hold tight." The rotor blades kicked up, and the helicopter lifted, tilting slightly as it cleared the ridge. Anna pressed Lewis back against her, holding him steady, her gaze fixed on the jagged rocks below. The ridge that had demanded so much from them now receded beneath a cloud of dust and shadow. Inside the cabin, the medevac team worked efficiently, securing stretchers, checking vitals, coordinating with the pilot. Anna moved between the wounded, her hands steady, but her mind replayed the day in relentless loops. She remembered the silence before the first shot, the metallic click of the sniper's rifle, the way Miller's voice had cut through her panic. She remembered Lewis screaming, Carter writhing in pain, the hot blood slicking her gloves. And then the shot, the recoil, a body jerking, sliding down the rocks into stillness. She swallowed hard. No one had asked how she felt. No one dared. And yet, everyone relied on her, not just for medicine but for presence, for calm, for that strange, unyielding courage she had been forced to summon. The helicopter banked, carrying them away from the ridge. Below, the valley stretched like a canvas of destruction and survival. Villages, fields, and craggy rocks blurred together as dust and heat shimmered against the sun. Anna sat beside Lewis, adjusting his blanket, monitoring his vitals, whispering reminders to stay conscious. She could feel the eyes of the men on her even here, in the safety of the air, and it unsettled her. She wasn't sure if she wanted their gratitude or their fear, but both were evident. She had become a symbol, a healer who had killed, a protector who had violated her own rules. For the first time in weeks, Anna allowed herself to think about what that meant. About who she had been when she arrived in this theater of war, who she had been as a medic, and who she had become in the moments between rounds and screams. She realized she didn't have a neat answer. There was no tidy resolution, no medal or commendation that could capture what she had felt, or what she had done. She had acted, and lives had been saved. That was all the proof she would ever need. The helicopter touched down at the extraction point, dust and heat whipping through the landing zone. Soldiers moved quickly, unloading stretchers, guiding the wounded, maintaining situational awareness. Anna helped lift Louis onto a gurney, ensuring he was secure. She patted his shoulder, offering a small smile. "You'll be okay," she said. He nodded weakly, eyes closing. "Thanks, Doc," he whispered. Her pack, still heavy, reminded her of the supplies she carried and of the rifle she had left behind. One hand had healed. One hand had killed. Both hands bore their marks. Both hands had ensured that they would all see another sunrise. Miller approached her once more, voice low. "You did good, Reyes. I don't say it enough, but you did." Anna met his gaze, unsure whether to feel pride or guilt. "I just did what I had to," she replied. He nodded, understanding more than words could express. War had changed all of them, and the ridge had changed her. As she followed the last of the wounded off the helicopter, Anna cast one final glance at the ridge. Dust swirled, rocks glinted in the sun, and the silence of that battlefield held a memory she would never forget. It had demanded everything from them, and she had answered. Her boots hit solid ground, but the weight of what she carried, both the living and the dead, would stay with her long after she left the ridge. She was a medic, yes, but she was more now. She had crossed a line, faced the choice of life and death, and emerged with lives preserved. The patrol moved toward the transport vehicles, weary but alive. Anna fell into step behind Miller, silent, her gaze fixed ahead. She had done her duty. She had saved them. And she had survived. Yet deep inside, she knew that the ridge would never truly let her go. Its jagged rocks, its shadows, and the memory of that single shot would echo in her mind for the rest of her life. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Courage sometimes demanded choices no one wished to make, and survival often meant carrying burdens that could never be set down. Anna Reyes, medic, protector, reluctant warrior, she had faced the ridge. And she had survived.